Alright, it shouldn't be news to you anymore that the new patch, Rising Flames, came with it a whole new area of the world to explore, that being Ember Bay on the Fire Island chain. The Fire Island chain is one of those regions we've been looking at on the world map from Guild Wars 2 for years now, that we got to go to in the original game, and unfortunately wasn't released with the sequel, and many of us have been drooling over. It's this kind of magic area that feels like it always should have been there. The problem with the Fire Island chain, though, generally with Guild Wars 2, is that there wasn't much story precedent to go there. Not when you're dealing with a narrative all about fighting Elder Dragons that aren't located anywhere near the damn place. And so finally, in this patch, several years after the release of the game, Arena have wormed their way around to giving us content in that area. I was very excited about this as a GW1 vet, as the Fire Island chain in my eyes was kind of the original endgame place before I knew about the Fissure of Woe or the Underworld from the previous game. And I think this has been on a lot of people's lists for a long time. So I want to talk about Ember Bay today. I want to talk about how exactly the map went and some of the new systems that they added in there. And funny enough, there's quite a lot of different things to discuss. So first of all, let's talk a bit about the map exploration, the way it looks. You guys should be seeing a little bit of that in the background already. Typically for me, whenever I go in there to record, it's goddamn night time, so there's only a little bit of day footage. And during the day, this place looks incredible. And it's for two main reasons, really. First of all, there is a new camera effect. You guys might remember just before the patch came out and we were looking at some of the trailers, they seem to have this really epic lens flare and grain going on in the screen, and we weren't sure whether that was just something that the team had added for the trailer specifically or whether it was actually in game. Turns out it is in game. I think we have seen Guild Wars 2 use lens flares before. Black Citadel comes to mind, really, but that was more of like a God Rays style effect. But here it's big, it's pronounced, it makes the sun pierce your eyes, fills your entire screen up, and I actually really like the effect. Sure, it might be a little bit low resolution, and sure, it might be a bit janky when you swivel your camera over to look at it, it'll like just pop in there. But those two things aside, this is a pretty cool tool, and I'm curious about whether the devs will use more of it in some of these other areas of the world that hopefully will be to come, like the Crystal Deserts. For what it's worth, that weird blinking in and out lens thing, I think that's what most people complain about. I do think the devs have the capacity to fix it. All it would need is about a 0.3 second fade in and fade out or so, and that's it, according to when the camera loads it on. And they've got a fade in transition effect anyway from the day-night cycle. So I don't know, if that gets resolved, it's definitely going to be a really nice touch to the game going forwards. And the other thing as well that I think makes this map look so good isn't necessarily the beautiful lava that they did and the new rocks and the skulls that they made and all that kind of stuff that all gels together to make this horrible, hellish landscape. It's actually the way they handle post-processing. Post-processing is one of these notorious noob traps for Guild Wars 2. You go in-game, when you first install it, you've got some kind of a beast PC, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to max everything out. You go down there, you put your post-processing as high as possible, and what you don't realize you've done is by using Guild Wars 2's native post-processing, you've made all of the skyboxes look ugly as all hell with overdone bloom, and you've drowned out a lot of detail in tons of different places. So generally post-processing has been the devil that eventually everybody learns to turn off. That's not true for this update. I don't know whether ArenaNet are getting to grips with it and realizing their mistake here, and they can change their post-processing and the values of the bloom or whatever based on location, but post-processing is really good on this map. It color grades it beautifully. I don't know whether it's just because the general levels of luminance on the map don't cause the bloom to go completely out all over the place, but it's brilliant. And for example, doing the jumping puzzle on this map or anywhere where there's a lot of hot lava and things, whether it's day or night, I actually really recommend you guys turn that on. And this is a good, decent successor to what we had in the first game. Before the patch came out, I asked you guys to think about something, and that was to look at the Guild Wars 1 Maguma jungle. And then look at how amazing the Guild Wars 2 Heart of Thorns Maguma jungle was. That was an insane jump in quality. Think about areas like Auric Basin and so forth. And I was wondering whether the Fire Island chain release here, which is coming as Living World, not an expansion, so presumably had a little bit less time for them to work on it, whether we would see that same jump again. I'm not sure whether I would go that far. It wasn't completely bonkers off the wall, but it is a contemporary, modern version of the Fire Island chain. It is distinct enough from places like Mount Maelstrom or Fireheart Rise, which we've had for 4 years now, and overall, I'm pretty satisfied with how it felt wandering around there and exploring the damn place. Another big worry of mine when it came to this new region was the things that the devs were actually putting in it. Namely, before release, we heard about the script being there, and I was kind of concerned that you shouldn't have comic relief little rodents in an area like this because they wouldn't gel well enough with the theme, they'd detract from the ideas of the place, and it wouldn't do it justice. Well, actually, considering that this script are all over the Fire Island chain, and considering they did even one further where there are lots of quite lush, jungly looking areas, and even a goddamn circus on the Fire Island chain, considering all of those things, I think my worries were completely unfounded. These things were all done really well. As I've mentioned in a recent video, the game kind of holds a mirror to itself, laughs at how ludicrous some of these ideas are. It keeps that comic relief in there just enough, with more than enough dialogue and other clues at the fact that this place is horribly deadly, for everything to gel together in a really nice way. In fact, I don't think I've met a single person who's actually legitimately claimed about, say, the existence of the circus and the inclusion of some of these other jungly ideas. There's not much more to say, really, about the map. The new music that was added is very fitting. I liked the inclusion of a lot of Guild Wars 1 Fire Island chain music came in here as well, so we get that little bit more. I do think that the standout music from the patch was in the story, when we're in a cool little virtual reality environment, but the ambient effects, hearing the volcanoes and the lava flows and the rocks and the thermal explosions around you, all really does come together in a great way. If you're remembering that Guild Wars does actually have in-game audio, I'd recommend turning it on, I suppose. The new mastery and traversal options with the thermal tubes that rocket you through the sky, which you'll be seeing plenty of in the footage in the background, was also a really nice touch, and I'm honestly looking forward to maybe getting more Fire Island chain maps where we get to see maybe even more advanced versions of these with even deeper masteries to go for to figure that kind of stuff out. I can imagine that entire region being unified by this single kind of thermal tubes transport system. My main problem in terms of the aesthetics of the map actually is literally to do with the map, as in the world map or the mini map. I think it has been rectified now. I am upset that the devs decided to essentially break away from what they had set up at the launch of the game for the Fire Island chain to look like, built their own island and just dumped it in there, and it was done really shoddily. Let me tell you guys, when this patch first came out, you could be stood on the shore of the new map, Ember Bay, looking east out towards Ore, and you'd see nothing but ocean. You'd see water. And yet your mini-map and the world map were telling you that you were in the middle of the Fire Island chain still. These things did not line up whatsoever. I do think those have been fixed now, but it kind of shows how slapdash the devs are being about implementing their new maps. It seems like they just take a giant rectangular-sized area, do whatever they want in it, and think about the map art at the end of the line, the very end of the line. And that's not the way I would hope that they do things. And I do say this in full awareness, by the way, of the fact you can rationalize away the map being different here because of the effects of Zaitan and tectonic activity and stuff. That's not really the point, though, for me, and it remains to be seen how much more of this we'll see with other maps in other areas of the world. There are some really small details on the world map that I would hate to see they just ignore, like the fact that the location of Churai's throne in the Crystal Desert is still there, surrounded by a moat now in Guild Wars 2, and I really want to see that be honoured and have Palawa Joko taking up residence or something exactly there, and that's just not going to happen if they're this cavalier with the map art when they just design their own new stuff. Anyway, so let's stop talking about such generic stuff about the new map. Let's move into some other things. One of the big new systems that came with Ember Bay were a new type of hearts. Hearts came back. These were the primary method of delivering content to players in the open world, I would say, at the release. They were not that well received, though the community, to be fair, is sort of split on them. I think some people do enjoy them. Well, they came back for the first time in 4 years. ArenaNet have given us more hearts. They have a slightly different icon now, and the key twist to them is that they are repeatable. Now, that might sound, if you really think about it at first, kind of weird. Like, what does that even offer? What's the benefit? Well, here's how the system works. Remember how originally, all the first hearts that were added to the game, you couldn't access the vendor's wares until you had the heart finished? Well, that's going on in the new map too. But the new vendors, for the new heart guys, have got wares that appear once per day, and say you can only buy once of them in that day, and then you have to come back to do it again tomorrow. But to do it tomorrow, you have to finish the heart again because the heart is repeatable. So that's the system they've got. There's a new currency in there, petrified wood, a new type of tree that you can cut down, which I thought was a really nice touch in Ember Bay, by the way. And it's kind of a reward you get for doing dailies in Ember Bay and doing some of the events in Ember Bay. But each time you finish a heart, you can go to the heart vendor, and for a little bit of karma, you can buy more of this wood, which will then feed into all your other rewards. That's where the strength of it as a daily system comes in. It's kind of an extension to just getting dailies through achievements. Now, all things considered, I don't think this is a major change, but I do think it's an improvement. Hearts, really, I could take them or leave them. Seeing what they've done here in this map, I don't think all of the hearts do that well to encourage exploration in this great, fascinating new way. And I don't think we really see too much discussion on the new hearts, really, because they are just kind of one of these grey middle ground things that it's not actually that revolutionary. We now have daily ones. There has been a bit of a backlash towards the daily hearts, but I think this is based on misfounded information and an issue in the engine right now, which the devs are seeking to rectify. And that's that they're messing up map completion for people. So what happens currently in Ember Bay is if you do all the hearts, get all the points of interest, the vistas, blah, 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 you get map completion, 100%, you get that little chest just like any other map interior. But then after 24 hours pass, or we go beyond reset, you lose those hearts, obviously, and then it's taking your map completion away again. That's not intended behavior, though, as far as I've been led to believe, and that's the main thing people don't seem to like, that they're losing their 100%. That's not how ArenaNet actually envisaged the system. And once that's changed, I think this is just kind of a nice little thing that's gone into the map and changes things up a bit from just doing the same 3 daily achievements like magic gathering each time. There are some real strengths to these hearts, though, that I do want to talk about, and that's in the rewards. The rewards are amazing. Real karma sinks, guys. So again, at launch we had all these hearts that all had rewards we could buy for karma. Karma being a currency, okay, that was an account-bound currency that proved anything you got for karma proved you were dedicated to the game and it was something you did yourself, right? That was why it was different to gold. Gold could change hands between any players, but karma was like reward for specific efforts. And yet they really messed up the balance, and karma for a long time, unless you work on a lot of legendary weapons or have engaged in a few niche ideas of earning money, karma has been a non-currency for many players who have just racked up millions and millions and millions of it and never cared. And that's because a lot of the rewards you got from those original heart vendors in Corteria just weren't worth going for. The gear progression as you level was easily skippable. You could go to other vendors or the trading post for your stuff anyway. They rarely offered interesting enough trinkets and so forth. So people just gathered tons of karma. And that's never super well been addressed. But if you look at the hearts on Ember Bay, they are incredible. They're what the heart vendors, in terms of rewards, always should have had. Each one of them has genuinely awesome, new, unique stuff. There's like a new version of Fire Elemental Powder, which lets you summon a little ally for yourself that can fight with you. They all have cool minis. They've got stuff that keys into the new weapon sets that you can get on the map, like the Destroyer weapons, I believe they're called, and a whole lot more. They are genuinely flavorful and well-priced rewards. This stuff costs a lot of karma. And then the map even helps you out with that too, by giving you a bit of a buff, which means you can get karma from kills as well as doing events. So I really think they balance that element of the map incredibly well. That's also where you end up spending a lot of your petrified wood, and this is really, I think, where most of the strength of the new hearts comes from. The hearts themselves as well, just to talk about them for a quick second, I think are really hit and miss. So the best one is definitely, to me, one where you're in an area with lots of falling, flaming debris from the Fire Island chain cascading around you, and you can pick up buckets to actually stand underneath them and get your timing right. You can catch this debris in your bucket and use it to whatever end, or you can cool things down, and it's kind of an interesting new little play with environmental object that we hadn't really seen anywhere else in the core game. Felt very Heart of Thorns-y in terms of its detail, as some of the Heart of Thorns events had similar stuff like that. That was really cool. I liked that heart. Many of the hearts have got an opportunity to fight, and the heart around the Massart Fortress I actually think is really cool. Generally, I find find fighting to complete hearts really flavorless and boring, and it's the kind of thing that most players resort to doing just because they want to speed through the hearts because there's not much interesting about them. But this one at the Masat Fortress I actually really like because the enemies around there are tuned to be quite difficult, and you really do want to be careful about how many you aggro. There's actual reason to team up with the other players you see in the area who are doing the heart, and they frequently will be because, hey, they're daily now. So that one was really cool. But there's other elements of the hearts that they did on Ember Bay that just completely uninspired, the same normal boring crap that we had way back at launch. Run around and press F on cameras, or just kill random mobs that this time are actually really easy to dispatch, which unfortunately includes, in my opinion, most of the new varieties of Destroyer, which is really unfortunate. So I think it was very hit or miss. From what I've seen of Ember Bay, I think if you're going to do hearts in future, the hearts need to have that extra level to them. This idea of just wandering around tapping F to clear up centaur graffiti, or to fix signs, or do whatever. If it's just as simple as pressing F on a yellow sign and then walking off, it's boring. I don't think any hearts need to have that. They need to have that extra bit of interaction, just like we see with, say, catching the falling, flaming debris. I'm curious what you guys have to say about the hearts, because, again, I don't think there's been too much discussion, but maybe it is just because, really, this isn't the most revolutionary thing. I guess the main question probably on our mind should be this: does it feel more exciting exploring Ember Bay because it has little hearts and stuff in it now than it did the Heart of Thorns maps, which were lacking them and relied pretty much entirely on large meta event change and stuff? Tell me what you guys think about that. Okay, so I talked a little bit about the enemies there. Let's talk about them in details here. I'm very disappointed that although there are tons of destroyers on the Fire Island chain, which is cool, and what the story absolutely calls for some reason, neither in the regular story nor in this new map, ArenaNet have just opted away from normal, nice destroyers. There's like one who's a boss in the map, and that's about it. It's far too many of the new green and black varieties of destroyers. I get it, they're the new hotness, they're cool, but so were the original destroyers. And when I think of a Fire Island chain filled with destroyers, surely it's the orangey ones. Maybe that's a minor nitpick. You guys will remember before this came out, I was really excited about the idea of this map having Hydra. Hydra being one of, personally, my favorite enemies from Guild Wars 1, especially this region of the world. And so far, we don't know whether they're extinct or what in Guild Wars 2. And this would have been a perfect place to drop them in. The devs didn't. I'm actually not too disappointed in this. So many people have messaged me saying, oh, WP, I'm so sorry there's no Hydras. I kind of readied myself for it, kind of braced myself a little when I noticed they didn't do it in the trailers. I mean, think about it, guys. If you're ArenaNet, if you've just created this entirely new type of enemy, or maybe a new skeleton on it, a new rig, a new anime, everything, okay, and you're not going to put it in a trailer, I don't really think that that was what was going on. Instead, we see a lot of varieties of dinosaur, Mordrum, pocket raptors make a slight return, rolling devils, stuff like that. But they're fitting enemies. That's the thing. Everything that we find here are fitting. I think the most delicate things we find on this entire map are tiny, weeny little crabs around in the shores. But hey, who's going to get offended at something like that? There's still a chance for Hydra on future maps, and their decision to basically add an entirely new Fire Island chain instead of putting it in established areas before does leave a lot of space to have more Fire Island chain content. Maybe we'll get Hydras then. I've still got my fingers crossed that at some point in Guild Wars 2, we will have that. The main thing that I would say as well, beyond the fact that the Karka came onto the map, which in the end I felt like they were just kind of dumped in there. There wasn't really too much more, but I still appreciate them. I would say it's kind of unfortunate how boring the new types of destroyers were. Or these are really the only new variety of enemy we had here, except some of the Jade Armors and Bows, which were first introduced in the last patch. But I can't help compare the new enemies we're getting now in Season 3 to the new enemy varieties we got in Season 2. The ones in Season 2 were really good. They were big shifts from what the standard was in Guild Wars 2 at the time. What do I mean by that? Well, think about Season 2. We had the Thrashers. We had guys that spun and moved very quickly. We had guys that were only vulnerable from very certain areas. We had the new types of tendrils and things, and some of the way that the events in Dry Top specifically worked was really interesting, the way they interacted with that, how some of these enemies respawned. We had stuff like, even not associated with dragon minions, stuff like the Beetles, which were frustrating to play against depending on your build, sure, but added a unique new twist, right, where they were only vulnerable right from that direct area in the very front. They seem to play with a lot more things. Now looking at Season 3, I don't know, man. The new destroyers say, oh, they take more damage when they're chilled, but they don't really seem to do any different. They're not tuned to be that difficult. I think that there's some real scaling issues on some of the events as well here, that means that they're over far too quickly. I don't know, I was just expecting a little bit more. The standout of the patch is definitely the Flame Siege Worms. These guys may be borrowing a lot of the animations and things from other worms we had in Guild Wars 2 already, but my god, the giant boss fight is probably one of my favourite events in the game so far. You should be seeing it in the footage right now. I love this guy, and it's not just because he looks badass, but it's because his encounter, I think, taps into everything that Guild Wars 2's combat should be. You got the ranged periods where he's hiding out in the pool of lava where you want to swap to whatever your range set is, so for me that was my hammer. Then you've got the short little burn periods where he slams his head into the ground and you get to swap to do a bit of melee damage and push out a bit more. You've got in the background a giant golem that you can buff up with might and fury and things to help you get more damage out quicker, and you can also exercise healing on as it's getting assaulted. You've got a ton of other ads around there to do a little bit of control. With the right tuning, this event has got the makeup of really good engaging content, and it's all based around a pretty badass looking enemy in the end too. So that was definitely the standout for me. There are some other good events too. You guys might have noticed that they did do in this patch something they did in the previous one, Bloodstone Fen, and that's that they took a raid boss and put it in the open world. Now the reason that they're doing this is obvious. The raiding community isn't necessarily that big, and so when the raid team spends a lot of time making a badass, specific, unique looking mob, it's really nice for them to double up and get more work out of that asset. So in Bloodstone Fen, we had the giant anomaly, the Veil Guardian, and it was kind of like a light version of that raid encounter. And here in Ember Bay, we have the giant sloth associated with the circus. This time, though, it's like I say, the event scaling seems a bit weird in Ember Bay. The sloth fight is over far too quickly. You barely get to see any of the mechanics going on at all, and you just sort of DPS him down. It doesn't feel like any of the things that appear in the raid really appear here at all, because it's just over so fast. So that's a bit disappointing, but I think for people who don't raid, the novelty of seeing an enormous, fluffy, weird-looking sloth thing like that, especially with all the brilliant, excellently crafted dialogue around it, is still going to give you quite a lot of value. So that was another standout for me, in addition to maybe a lot of the fun little script moments. Aside from events, killing stuff, doing the main story, the new map does come with a handful of achievements. It's obviously got the giant jumping puzzle. I'm going to do my own specific video on the jumping puzzle for you guys, which has got its own fair share of things to talk about. But the map does have littered around it bits of lore. Not as much lore as Bloodstone Fen had, which had 3 separate big books, basically, filled with information. Here on Ember Bay, we just get 10 entries to do with a bit of Masart lore, and we get a little journal from one of the Asura who was on the island for a little while. And the main thing, though, achievement-wise, is the Masart tokens. I thought this was a really cool idea. Masart tokens were old trash loot that you could get for killing Masart back in Guild Wars 1, and you killed a lot of Masart on the Fire Island chain. So it's a fun idea to think that they've left all these tokens all over the place. There is no lore associated with them. This is probably the most advanced version of the find all the gold coins event thing that we've had so far. So like Dry Top added a version of this, the Silver Waste added a version of this, several Heart of Thorns maps added light versions of this. Well, we get it here, combined again, remember, with that new user interface thing where you can get hints for the locations of all the objectives of your achievement. This is awesome, and some of them are brutally, cruelly hidden, but that gets you exploring all the cool little niches and winding paths in the back areas that you may not have noticed, and gets you to appreciate, I think, the size of this environment that otherwise is quite easy to rocket around when you're just getting your daily stuff because of the thermal tubes or the waypoints and so forth. So the other big achievement I think that a lot of people have been discussing is something I actually haven't done and might be getting patched, but it's an achievement where you're supposed to get 50 apples for a guy, and it's just a lot of running around, just major MMO fetch quest stuff. And I fully appreciate that Guild Wars 2 has a community where people don't like stuff like that. However, on paper, this doesn't seem so bad to me because it's just an achievement, right? Like, it's It's just something optional to go for if you feel like it's worth the effort. We shouldn't feel the need that we absolutely have to do this one thing. And if ArenaNet want to make it quite absurd in the amount of things you need to get, then let it go down as this infamously absurd thing. I don't think it's some major design issue, but maybe I should hold my judgment on that one until I've done it. I've also heard of a couple of cunningly hidden achievements as well that won't even appear until you've got them. There's one for delivering some items 7 days of the week to a captain, and those are the kind of cool little things as well I like to see to go into Guild Wars 2. But all in all, because of the rewards from the Karma vendors, because of the new map currency and the unbound magic and stuff, I think you're going to see a lot of people playing on this map for a long time, which is exactly what the new maps need. If ArenaNet's vague plan, and remember this is not a promise, but if their vague plan to try and add a new map for each Living World episode actually comes to fruition, they need to make sure that all these maps have got some kind of longevity to them. And I think they've probably hit that balance quite well in Ember Bay. The only thing that Ember Bay is missing on the content side, I think, is a large meta. But given the kickback that came from people who didn't like that in Heart of Thorns, can you really blame the devs? And so there you go, guys. That's pretty much it. That's Ember Bay. I wanted to talk to you about it. I wanted to show you. I hope you enjoyed a bit of the footage in the background there of what the map looks like. And I do encourage you guys to get in there, especially if you're a GW1 player and you were particularly excited about returning to the Fire Island chain. It loses a little bit of its luster because this isn't the exact areas we used to wander around on. It's not the Door of Kamali. It's not the Bloodstone and so on and so on and so on. But it's that one little step closer. And I cannot describe really my feeling of excitement and happiness when I logged in for the first time after the patch, pressed M to open my world map, and saw all the little yellow dots of guildmates in the Fire Island chain, of all places, in Guild Wars 2. There you go, guys. I'll let you know how all the future maps come out too. Thanks very much for watching. That's my little assessment of Ember Bay. Let me know if I missed anything, and particularly, talk about the hearts. Let's hear what you guys think, honestly, about the hearts. Take them or leave them. I mean, as I say, I'm really kind of on the middle ground with them. I just think I know where they do them badly. And that's about it. Thanks, guys. Hope you have a wonderful evening. I'll see you next time. Have a great day. Because this would earn them profit. So this quote inspired a lot of discussion in the community because it was kind of one of these things of, oh,